All right, I am here at the Boston Liberation Center with Flo, who is an organizer here. Flo, thank you so much for sitting down with me today.
Thank you so much for having me. I'm excited to talk about what the organizers here have been doing. Yeah.
Awesome. So, first, I want to start out with Boston Liberation Center. I found out about this particular organization recently. I saw an Instagram post. I think it started when there were more protests starting in Boston for pro Palestine. That's when I started to see videos from Boston Liberation Center. But I want to hear a little bit about the organization and what everyone does here, because I think it's not just about fighting for Palestinian people. I think there's also, you guys are fighting for political prisoners like Mumia, for example, as well.
Yeah, absolutely. The Boston Liberation Center is a socialist working class community center here in Roxbury. We've been open going on about to be 3 years now. And organizers in the space, like you said, we've been very involved in the campaign and just movement in general, for Palestinian freedom and into the genocide. And we use this space as, an educational one, where we bring people into space for, film screenings where we're watching and talking about documentaries, or forums where we're learning about, what's happening currently, how do we organize, how do we stay involved in the struggle. And then also building with our neighbors in our community and, what can we do here and address, right here, on our street, as well.
So one of the things I was interested in, I know you all do like movie screenings and things like that as well. How did the organization start? And I know in particular, particularly like here in Boston, it's very difficult, I'm sure as you know, to get space like for organization just because everything is expensive and like skyrocketing throughout the city. But how did the organization originally start and why did it start?
Yeah. So the Boston Liberation Center is anchored by the Party for Socialism and Liberation. And so us organizers saw the need for a community center and like a space that doesn't already exist in Roxbury. And, we know that this neighborhood, like not having the resources. And yeah, I mean, I think what I can say is that was a huge collective effort, a huge we're self-funded and like volunteer funded. So it was a lot of, searching for this lease, which we were really lucky. I think this used to be a restaurant. It was vacant. And yeah, I'm just really like proud and yeah, grateful that we've been able to, have it open and have it. But yeah, I think essentially it was just like we saw a need and in the community and we tried to find a way to address it.
Do you feel like the acceptance of socialism is becoming a little bit more mainstream now? I look back towards the Bernie Sanders campaigns, and I feel like there was the spotlight on social democrats, and I think that that kind of opened the door for more young people to embrace different, types of socialism. But do you feel like, and especially with younger people, do you feel like more people feel that it's more accepting to embrace socialism today?
I definitely agree with that. I definitely think so. I mean, yeah, looking back at the Bernie Sanders campaign, I think the past few elections for young people who are growing up and starting to become able to vote, more and more we're seeing that like the options that we have are just not meeting the demands of the people of the working class, and that we need another solution. And so Bernie Sanders, like having the platform that he did, yeah, I think young people were attracted to that. Like, oh, there is something else besides being a Democrat, besides, being, voting for anyone that's voting, no, blue no matter who has, been that like big slogan for a long time that we see the, political parties and ruling class really hold up. And so that was an opening into that. But I think now, especially because of, seeing the complicity and complete support that the U.S. Leadership, Biden, right, has given to Israel, and the fact that thousands and millions of people, young people, I mean, have been going out saying that, this is just simply unacceptable. We're seeing that the current system, the capitalist system, is the problem, is the root of the issue. And so we're looking, like, young people are looking for the answer, the solution, because there has to be another way, and there is, and we know that there is a way that we can live where people are put over profit, where people are put over war, right? And that a system like that exists, and that's what young people want. Like, we're fed up, all of us are really fed up with the current system. So, yeah, and I think that attractiveness of socialism, I think it's just growing. I think that movement is growing.
But I'm really excited about all the younger people that are participating in the protests. Also, the campus encampments that have been happening as well. I really do feel like, particularly your generation, like you are the voice of the future. In reference to Israel, I think the Biden administration has been incredibly surprised at the response that has come from not just younger people, but from all over the world. There has been a lot of backlash, and I don't think they were genuinely accepting that. And why do you think that is? Why do you think they are surprised at the response that they've received, especially from younger people in this country, about Israel's assault on Gaza? And I call it Israel's assault on Gaza because we have to stop calling it a war.
Right, exactly. It's an assault on Gaza. It's a genocide against the Palestinian people, and I think that's a really good question. I think Biden. I think the ruling class has gotten really comfortable, thinking that they can continue to continue to give the same lies and the same propaganda and the same skewed media, and that people are going to continue to fall for it. And so I think they're surprised that I don't know, that people are yeah, I think that people are not just taking what is being said and just rolling with it, and people are yeah, and people are asking now and saying that we've asked for many things, throughout his entire presidency, and all these bills that he was going to say, student loan forgiveness, right? Just one of many things that he hasn't met. And so I think that's a big part. I think the ruling class has just gotten really comfortable using the same tactics that they always do, and that it's just not working anymore. And not even just being surprised that this is happening, but the gravity of it, or just the size of it. Like you said, it's not just young people. It's not just all over the world. It's people in all sectors of life. Older people, working people. We've seen a lot of unions, step out and make statements again. Workers' unions make statements, in support of Palestine. The writers. A lot of different people, different sectors of life coming out in support of this movement. And yeah, I think they're scared. I think they're really scared, as they should be. I think Biden is terrified. I think they're realizing that we're persistent and we're relentless this time. And I think that's very scary for them. Yeah.
So recently, Hillary Clinton made a statement on Morning Joe that basically young people have been propagandized by TikTok. I would say that Morning Joe and shows like Morning Joe is actually propaganda, not what you're seeing on TikTok. But she said this recently, and I don't know if you know this, but obviously the ADL was behind the TikTok ban, or trying to shut down TikTok. If you could speak to Hillary Clinton today in reference to that particular comment, what would you say to her?
Oh, geez. I would say that it is not TikTok that is radicalizing the youth. I think it is the fact that she has always been she is a member of the ruling class, and she has always sided with she has always been on the side of war, of genocide, of pushing for us to intervene in the Middle East, and bomb countries and bomb millions of people. And then also we turn around and look, inward as well, whether it was the crime bill or all these different acts of state violence and repression against Black people. That is what is radicalizing the youth. Growing up seeing that, and seeing that they're learning from their parents that they have experienced that. that is what's radicalizing youth. I mean, the fact that we're not seeing any federal gun control laws, and students have to learn how to lock down, their classrooms, and they grew up with that. Like, they are seeing continuously the failure of every administration, Republican or Democratic, to protect our lives, to protect their lives. That is what is radicalizing. That is what is radicalizing youth. It's your failure as a supposed leader, right? That is what's radicalizing the youth. And their fear of TikTok. I mean, what is it that young people are able to have information, on their hands, and are able to talk, it's, yeah, I don't know. I just think it's so stupid when people use, like, oh, the internet and this and that, oh, the youth, like, they don't know anything. And that's another thing too. It's like this assumption that that young people aren't smart and can't see the problems that are happening, and also they can see the problems that happen, and they can also see the solutions that exist. And so it's very clear when politicians just refuse to take the right action. It's not this big idea of, like, young people don't understand politics, it's above them, and things like that. It's not like that. I think I'm kind of going off on a little bit of a rant now, but yeah.
Well, in reference to, we have the presidential election that's coming up this year in November. Joe Biden obviously has lost tremendous support from young voters. He's lost support from Black voters, Hispanic voters. It's actually pretty embarrassing, I think, for the Democratic Party, like what has happened since Joe Biden has become president. But again, I do think that the Biden administration, and I also feel that mainstream media, are not trying to find ways to connect with those particular groups that Joe Biden has lost. And in particular, younger voters. I feel like they're making the same mistake that Hillary Clinton did in 2016 when she was running against Bernie Sanders. Obviously, Bernie Sanders found a way to appeal to younger people. If you could speak to Joe Biden today, and if he were to come to you and say, well, are you crazy? If you don't vote for me, you're going to get Donald Trump, which is the rhetoric that they're going with, right? What would you say to him?
That is a rhetoric, yeah, here often. I would say that if Joe Biden came up to me and said, vote for me because if Trump gets, oh, what about Trump getting presidency? I would say to Joe Biden that he is no different than Trump. I would say to Joe Biden that the two parties are just two sides of the same coin. They're two wings on the same bird, right? Like, that is the fundamental truth of it. What's going to happen when what's going to happen when if Trump, gains presidency? The same things that are currently happening. The U.S. will continue to support the genocide of Palestinian people. The U.S. is going to continue to pour millions and billions of dollars to continue to bomb countries around the world. The U.S. is going to continue to neglect the needs of people here and continue to violently repress Black people, students, etc. That is all going to continue, whether it's under Joe Biden or whether that's happening under Donald Trump. And so I would say that at the end of the day, I'm not voting. People do not want to vote for a genocider. People do not want to vote for warmongers. People don't want to vote for these evil, cruel people any longer. And so you're no different than Trump just because you look a little nicer, you smile a little more,
This is why they fear the younger generation. This is why they fear the younger generation, because they know that you have woken up to what is really happening. You know that both parties are corporate. You know what's happening behind the scenes. That things that when I was, in undergrad, I was not aware of these things. I actually thought the Democratic Party was the lesser evil. I learned these things later on. I thought that Barack Obama was going to be the change that we wanted to see coming. But obviously, he ended up being just like the rest of them as well. And I think that it terrifies them, especially particularly in this race, that now there are other candidates running outside the duopoly that are actually pretty popular. You have Jill Stein, you have Dr. West, you have RFK Jr., although I've said this multiple times, RFK Jr. has even worse position on Israel than Biden and Donald Trump do. But I think they are terrified now, knowing that there are people running that do have name recognition and they're showing up in the polls as well. And I want to get your opinion about that.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely agree with that. I think, yeah, Joe Biden's approval rating is like in the 30%, somewhere in there, something, one of the lowest, in history of US presidents. So that says something. That's huge. And I agree. I think they are terrified that people, yeah, aren't going to keep the power in that duality anymore, right? That people are looking for other options and that they exist. And that and that it is like we should be having this option, right? It's not democratic that we're always choosing between the two, one of the lesser evils, right? And so it's really exciting to see, and it's what we should be seeing. And the Party for Socialism and Liberation is also running independent candidates as well. So that is also has been also going out and talking to people, and yeah, we're building a race around that. And so I think, yeah, I think it's just something that's really important. And I think, yeah, absolutely, they're really scared, as they should be. Yeah, definitely, they're seeing the power is really slipping from their hands, I would say.
We are looking around the Boston Liberation Center here. And one of the things that I notice is some of the posters that are here, Mumia and Huey. And I want to hear from you a little bit, the importance of these particular revolutionary figures.
Yeah, absolutely. So Mumia Abu Jamal is currently a political prisoner, and has been for decades. And Huey Newton was one of the leaders of the Black Panther Party. And there's also a lot, of other freedom fighters all around this space. And yeah, I mean, it's really important because these are the people that we're fighting for, and these are the people that have fought for us, right? And so it's important that we are always learning from past leaders of the struggle, as we fight for Black liberation. Especially, we know that collective liberation has to come from the liberation of the most oppressed, our Black people, and so. It's something that we exalt in the space. It's something that we're always learning about and reading together, learning from these figures. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think what some people may not know is that, when we talk about political prisoners, a lot of times we do mention Julian Assange. I think he's probably the most popular political prisoner, but there's also Mumia, right? So there's also people like him. And Huey P. Newton, a little fun fact, I think some people may not be aware of this. Huey P. Newton actually had a PhD, and I don't think a lot of people are aware of that. So just a little tidbit here. Let's go over a little bit to here because I want to show people some of the literature. So, Palestine, Israel, and the U.S. Empire. This is by Richard Becker. So, this is one of the books I think a lot of people do recommend if you're curious about the conflict between Israel and Palestine, etc. I also think this is pretty interesting. A Fighting Dream: The Political Writings of Claudia Jones. See, what I thought was pretty cool because I was looking around when we first came in here at the literature. It's not like your typical, I guess, mainstream literature that you would expect to see. Like it's not just MLK or like.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, obviously, like MLK is absolutely, a huge civil rights leader as well. But there's so many other revolutionaries and radicals that we don't learn about in history, and that's the really important thing. Like we don't learn about them, and as we're growing up, we're not really taught about them because they're not seen as the right type of revolutionary, right? And so it's really important that we bring light to that and talk about it and read about them, because there are so many who are socialists too, explicitly, which is also something too that, that is really an important anchor for, just like learning about the different movements and also learning that they're happening globally. And so it's really important that we're having that national, like international solidarity as well, and learning from movements that have happened around the world and leaders from all over the world. Yeah.
That's right. And I noticed Cuba too, fighting for Cuba, fighting for socialism. I feel like Cuba is demonized by our government a lot. And I think a lot of Americans just don't have a strong understanding of what has happened to Cuba, or they're not knowledgeable about the embargo. in reference to Cuba, but there are things that Cuba has that we just don't have here in the United States. They have a longer life expectancy than we do. Everybody has health care in Cuba. These are the types of things I feel like our government doesn't tell you.
Oh, absolutely. They don't tell you that because they don't want you to think it's possible. They don't want you to think it's possible. And that's why it's like so important, and that's why they're terrified that people know that it's possible now. And yeah, Cuba, the US completely demonizes Cuba, completely demonize it because it's a socialist country, because it is a country that provides its people with free, adequate health care, with affordable housing, right? With public free education, like all of these basic needs that we have been screaming for and fighting for here in the States are provided for and given like to people in Cuba. And that's, and that's why they demonize it. They don't want us to know that a system that isn't a capitalist system exists and works and meets the needs that we have. And so, you know, with the embargo that the U.S. has imposed on Cuba for decades, they twist that, and they use that as a way to show, look, socialism doesn't work because look how poor Cuba is, right? Look how poor these countries that are trying to build their socialist project are. But in reality, they're poor because the U.S. has put all of these embargoes and sanctions on them so that they can't receive enough resources that they're supposed to. The raw materials that they need. They can't get enough pharmaceuticals care, that they might need, and so they have to be completely self-sufficient. The U.S. demands them to do even more, right? To have to sustain them, which only shows that if they didn't have an embargo, the fact that they can provide these to, free healthcare, education, housing to people despite the embargo, despite the sanctions, that if they didn't have that, they would be a thriving, flourishing like nation, and that would spread, and so that's why we see that. We've seen that, yeah, for years.
Another one, Asada Shakur. Another one that I think people really need to know about. My comrade JB from RBN, he actually read one of her books, chapter by chapter, on his channel. She's another one I feel that a lot of people just are not aware about. She was not in my history book.
Oh, absolutely not. Definitely not in mine either. But she is incredible. I'm currently actually reading her autobiography, Asada, and fantastic book. Her resilience, and the way she speaks about growing up and how she really explored all of the different struggles that were happening and all the different forms that Black liberation and Black power really took, as well as just the unfathomable experience and the ability of her to like survive as a political prisoner, and then currently like seeking asylum in Cuba. And so that book I think is something that's essential for people to read. I think you should definitely, if you have not read something that Asada Shakur wrote, you should. And her I think she's just really foundational in that struggle, not just for Black liberation, but the liberation of gender oppressed people, national liberation. And she is just so clear on the necessity and the need for socialism, for the end to a capitalist regime. And she shows that it is possible, and it is true, and like we can make that happen. And reading that and knowing that her and other freedom fighters back then like what they went through, like if it's that fire that fuels us, like if they could do, we have to keep going. We have to keep going because of what they've done and how they've fought for us, right?
That's right. I just think it's really important. These are the things that we don't hear much about. I love the sign here. It says Roxbury for the people, not for profit. We're going to talk a little bit about the housing issue in just a second. That's been happening here, particularly in Roxbury. Reproductive rights, which I think is also very important. If we come over here this way, Greg. What is this artwork here? What's this in reference to?
Yeah, it's a really hard story to tell, honestly. But I don't know if you guys heard about the Justice for Faisal campaign last summer. But basically, well, actually, it was last winter and summer. It was quite a long campaign. But in January of last year, Arif Saeed Faisal was murdered by. He was a student in Cambridge. He was murdered by police during a mental health crisis. He was self-harming, and someone called the police for help. They ended up shooting him. And he was really young. I think he was like 20, 21.
I remember that.
Yeah, and so this is one of the murals. So we picketed outside Cambridge City Hall consistently, like day in, day out for weeks, demanded a sit-down meeting with the mayor. We marched, we rallied, like we were doing this for months. And so this was this was the big mural that we kind of made on the lawn of City Hall, you know, throughout the days while people were coming and going and marching, you know, and picketing and rallying. So, and so this was, yeah, so we like wrote out, why do we fight for justice? And in all the little like tears and like pieces of paper here is an answer to why do we fight? And then justice for Faisal on the bottom. So this is and just like a drawing that someone made of him to honor him. And then these are the reasons that people say, you know, why do we fight? What possibility for good would we end? They will keep killing us if we stop. No one deserves to die like he did. Place or mental health should not be a death sentence. Cops should never respond to mental health crisis. People deserve care during crisis.
That's right.
Yeah. Police exist to protect capital and to fight against the working class. No one should lose their son, brother, cousin, friend. Community safety means no racist policing. It could have been me.
Yeah.
That one.
Yep. Yeah, I remember this story when it happened. I think I covered this story because I think for people in the community, it was very shocking. It wasn't shocking for me because I know how police can be. But yeah, I do remember this, and it's really sad and really tragic what happened to him. And then over here, you have Harriet Tubman Freedom Park, established in 2022. I want to hear a little bit about this.
Yes, yeah, 2022. So like I was saying, there is the Harriet Tubman Freedom Park. It's a lot that's next door to the center. And so we actually named it Harriet Tubman Freedom Park to honor a struggle that happened a few years ago, where there was a center, the Harriet Tubman House in Roxbury. It was a little before I ended up here, but they were going to demolish it, and it was a space that obviously was, you know, upholding. It was a very important space for for the Black community in Roxbury and Dorchester, and so they ended up tearing it down. You know, people really came out and rallied and tried to stop it, and so we decided to name the park in honor of that struggle. And we're really excited that we're going to be able to have that space and save it too. Like, we wanted to be able to take the green space and have it be for the people instead of, you know, letting eventually a building or a development go up there. We wanted to keep it as a green space for people in the community. So this summer we'll be doing construction, you know, and putting a lot of nice stuff in, cleaning it up and getting it ready for the fall and everything. So,
Okay, so I know that one of the initiatives that Boston Liberation Center has been very vocal about is obviously gentrification and the housing developments that have been coming into pretty much all over the city, a lot of working class neighborhoods. It's happening in Jamaica Plain. It's been happening in Jamaica Plain, Dorchester, also, of course, Roxbury. This particular site right here is across the street from the Boston Liberation Center. What is happening with this space here?
Yeah. So Edge Real Estate Investments is a property management company. They are planning to build a 36 unit development. And this is going to be the site of the main lot for it. And yeah, it's going to be this big gaudy building. The units are going to be market rate. And we know what that means because market rate is not affordable. And they're also actually basing the AMI off of the income of Boston rather than Roxbury. So market rate for Boston is not market rate for Roxbury, if that makes sense. So it's something we know that's going to be unaffordable, and nobody in the community was, you know, consulted or about anything about it before it was went, started to go through, BPDA and everything.
Right. And what's going to happen is, and if we can just pan over here for a second to kind of show people the area, what's going to happen is when they bring in these types of developments, that means that the property value of these of the neighboring properties here, this is also going to increase for them. This is how local businesses get pushed out of the neighborhood. This is what people have to understand about gentrification. Obviously, there is going to be a certain segment of the population that's going to be able to afford like market rate for this type of housing. So then you'll start to have like professionals come into the community that never lived in the community before. And that just, it drives up the price around the properties all around here. That means that people's rent is going to increase as well. And this is just an ongoing pattern with gentrification in the area.
Yeah, absolutely. It definitely is. Us organizers, we've gone and talked to everybody, in the neighborhood, and they're all sharing that concern, right? That it's not going to be affordable, and that people are going to be, people of Roxbury, people who this is where their family's from, right? Like they've lived here for years, maybe, generations, are going to end up being displaced, because of this. And yeah, this is happening all over. And that's the thing too, right? Like instead of bringing the resources that Roxbury so desperately needs into the community, they would rather put market rate, put expensive housing there, and bring other people into the neighborhood to, spruce it up. And it's completely neglectful of the people that live here in this neighborhood. It's completely neglectful of the residents who are going to experience the consequences and the effects of this going up here. It's going to really change the fabric of the neighborhood, like like you were speaking to. And so, it's completely unjust. And so, that's why we've been petitioning. We've been, we held a speak out here right in front of this lot to bring awareness to where it was going to be. We've door knocked. We created a petition and had three main demands on it. The first one being that the unit should be all of the units should be affordable. Legally, units are required to have a couple units affordable. There's a legal minimum. We're demanding that they all be affordable instead of market rate. Our second demand is that the rent should be based off of Roxbury's right income instead of Boston's, right? The actual neighbor, actual people here. That feels like that should be how it goes, right? That feels like it should be obvious. And then the third one, our third demand for an in-person community sit down of face-to-face interaction, discussion about what they're trying to do, because the developers have completely neglected doing that. Nobody in the neighborhood knew about this when we heard about this. And we heard about it by accident, honestly. And so imagine, right? Yeah, they've completely neglected that. And it's just ridiculous that we just see this happening over and over again, where landlords and developers, people that don't live here, come in and try to make as much money off of the neighborhood as they can, make as much money off of people here.
That's right. Yeah, it's definitely been an ongoing issue. And I think that a lot of times the residents in these communities, their voices are not heard, or their voices are heard, but they're just ignored. I think a lot of people may have had hope for, Mayor Wu when she got into office, but these developments are still continuing regardless of if it's Mayor Menino or if it's, Marty Walsh or if it's Mayor Wu. So it's been an ongoing issue within the community. And also, I want you to think about what Flo just said about 36 units. 36 units here. You see, Boston is very dense. So it's not like we have a lot of space to work with in the city. So they've been doing this, and not just in Boston, they've been doing this in Cambridge and Somerville as well, where they're cramming in these residential buildings. And it looks really awkward. People know that doesn't belong there. So it's just like, we saw this happen. I've seen it happen in Cambridge and Somerville as well. And it really changes the character of the neighborhood, I think.
Absolutely. Definitely changes the character of the neighborhood. I think Roxbury is a really lovely and beautiful neighborhood. There's so much culture. There's a lot of vibrancy here. The people here. And so for that to all change without anyone's say is just it's unjust. It's not right. The decisions that are made in the community should be, determined. The changes made should be determined by the, community, by the people themselves,
I agree 100. All right, Flo. Well, thank you so much for your time today.
Right. Thank you so much for having me. It's been great.